Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. And today we're going to answer the question of what the heck do we do with all of our garbage on board? The Navy estimates that a sailor generates about 2 pounds of waste every day. So, with a crew of 2,000 people uh, being designed for this ship, that's something like 2 tons of waste every day. Surface ships like this one are designed to be able to stay at sea unsupplied for about 30 days and to be able to deploy for significantly longer than that. So that trash would just pile up. What do you do with it? Well, if we go all the way back to the age of sail, any sort of waste just goes straight overboard. Practically everything is organic, and these wooden sailing ships are just constantly being followed by sharks, dolphins, other sea life that is eating a lot of the waste that's generated, and everything else just sinks to the sea floor. And there wasn't much concern about environmentalism at that point. Now, fast forward to this ship's career, and we're starting out in the middle of World War II, and ships are being sunk left, right, and center. All the garbage on them is ending up in the sea floor, whether it's the oil that's still leaking out of Arizona or the trash, the food stores, all of that. So again, waste isn't a huge concern, and oftentimes it's just thrown overboard, particularly in the deep sea. By the time we get to the 1980s, when this ship is reactivated, it's more common to store or destroy your waste. And when I say waste, we're talking about a couple of different types of waste that ships create. There's a bunch of different types of waters that are created. Black water, which comes from the toilets, gray water that comes from like sinks and showers and that sort of stuff, oily water from the bilges. Then we also generate medical waste. We generate food waste. And then we get into more solid stuff. There are metals that are generated, empty cans from the galley, scraps from the machine shop, stuff that we would normally recycle on land, but where do we recycle it on a ship? And then there's papers, and by the 1980s, significant quantities of plastics. So obviously, you can't dispose of all of this stuff in the same way. I mean, even in your home today, you don't dispose of it all in the same way. Some of it goes in the garbage can, some of it might go down the sink, a lot of it goes in the toilets, into the sewers, and some of it goes into recycling. Iowa-class battleships always had an incinerator. We are standing in front of the ship's incinerator, which is pretty far back aft, just a little bit forward of the ship's galley, and positioned just to port of the center line, with the bakery on one side and the butcher shop on the other. On New Jersey, it's a butcher shop. On some of the other Iowas, it's a donut shop by the 1980s, depending on which booklet of general plans you're looking at. So, I believe that this incinerator is probably a newer version. It was probably retrofitted in the 80s. I can't find a date on it, but it does not look like an original World War II incinerator. And this ship tended to use the original World War II equipment all the way through Vietnam, and then get a lot of new stuff in the 80s. So my rough estimate is that this was dropped in the 80s. If you were to go to, say, Battleship Massachusetts, which is still in her World War II configuration, she does have an original World War II incinerator in a roughly similar place, a little bit forward of the galley. And you can check that out. I'm not sure if the other World War II battleships have one on their tour route, but if there's one near your hometown, go and look. What you do with trash sometimes depends on where you are. If you're within 3 miles of shore, you tend not to put anything into the water. You're too close, that's all going to wash up on the civilian beaches, even if you're in a war zone. If you're within 12 miles of shore, within international waters, you're also going to hold most of your stuff. And the ship had sewage handling tanks added in the 1980s for just that purpose, so that you're not dumping raw sewage. But the same goes with garbage. When you're outside of 12 miles from shore, you can just drop a lot of stuff over the side of the ship. And depending on the configuration for the Iowas, at some points, those 40 millimeter gun tubs on the fantail, when the 40 millimeter guns were removed, those were turned into basically trash chutes that you could dump garbage out of.
And my first assignment was working for the U.S. Navy. And I got to build, because of the changing Navy, they have these big machines on the Navy ships now that you take all the plastic water bottles and you put them in these machines, and the machine takes and compresses them and melts them with 440 volt three-phase electricity. It heats them up and it encapsulates this 22-inch diameter, which is bigger than the scuttles on this ship. 22-inch diameter hockey puck about that thick, which ends up weighing about 30 pounds, and they take, and once they've got it melted and everything, they put seawater in it and cool it and solidify it, and you take it out and you stack it in a rack like you do CDs, and when the ship gets back to port, and then they can take that plastic and recycle it. When I was on in New Jersey, we had these bricks delivered aboard the ship, and I thought we were going to have a barbecue. You know, they were going to build a barbecue pit on the ship. They do that sometimes. They'll take oil drums and they'll cut them down and make a barbecue on it, and they'll cook food and everything, and then they just throw it over the side once they're done. You know, they don't keep it around. And so I thought they were going to make a barbecue, and then the guy says, no. He says, that's what we put in the garbage bags to weight it down. So they would use the big black garbage bags that you're used to seeing now. They already had them back then, and they would put bricks in it and then tie it up, and then they take it out to the end of the ship and they drop it. I have this mental image of the bottom of the ocean with all these little black brick-shaped objects down there, because the pressure down there just crushes all that stuff right around the brick. So there must be littered down there with this. I used to do that. We didn't have holding tanks for the sewage, for the dirty water. All this stuff has been added to the modern Navy. Everything just, when you came into port, they put it into a temporary storage tank. But when you went out to sea, it all just goes into the sea.
So what sort of stuff gets incinerated? Obviously, we're holding all of our waters. The bilge waters get pumped out in international waters, even though it's oily. There may be a strainer system with that, but I'm not entirely sure. The gray waters, your CHTs, and your black waters, is held in holding tanks until you can discharge it safely. Medical waste, paper products, food products, that tends to get incinerated. Glass and metal has to be either compacted and stored so that it can be thrown overboard or stored long term. With plastics, I'm not entirely sure. You can technically incinerate them. That does create byproducts depending on the plastic, so I'm not sure if that's something they would have done. You might have just ended up storing it on board until you meet up with a resupply ship. And you can always send trash over to the resupply ship when you're resupplying. Oftentimes, I suspect things just go over the side. As time goes on, the methods for disposal only becomes more stringent. So modern Navy ships undoubtedly have greater trash disposal facilities than we do here. So what is the path of trash on this ship? Stuff comes onto the ship in containers. As that stuff is consumed, the containers are left. So the galley in particular is making a lot of waste. Other storage areas are making a lot of waste. So all of that storage stuff gets thrown into trash bags. Whether it's the galley, the scullery after you've cleaned it up, or whether it's coming from some other area on the ship. There are waste baskets in the staterooms, in the berthing spaces, and of course in the galley spaces, all over the ship. So this stuff is collected by some of the S divisions, most likely, and they all the trash is taken to a storage area or here to the incinerator. On modern ships, you separate out the different types of trash. I'm not entirely sure if that was done on this ship, and if it was, where. In addition to the incinerator here, we have two separate, very small compartments just aft of the incinerator. And these compartments are just storage voids for trash. And they have a door on each end. They're an airlock. So when you're running the incinerator, there's a fire going. It's really hot in here, and it is sucking in a lot of air. So we have two separate massive supply vents putting air into this space. But all that air is going into the fire, so this space is basically pulling a vacuum. So trash is put into the airlock on the other side, stored in that room, and then as trash is being put into the incinerator here, you're opening the doors and taking it out, with the doors on the other side being closed. Now there's a contactor attached to a light above the door, so you can tell if one door or the other is open, because it may be difficult to open or close the doors if both end up open, with this sucking all the air out of the space. As far as the incinerator itself, it's very similar to a boiler. It's got fire brick on the inside. It's got fire brick on the inside for insulation. The bottom is grated so that ash created can just drop through there and you can shovel it out from the bottom. Otherwise, this space is painted in the high heat alumina silver pattern, which you would have seen in most of the engineering spaces during World War II. It's kind of interesting that this ship was, even after her modernization in the 80s, that this color scheme remains in here. All of the other spaces have a more modern color scheme, so I'm not quite sure why this is. Other features in here, the incinerator attaches to an uptake for the funnel on the forward side. And, oh, that's interesting. There's a rack mounted on the bulkhead right there for a broom, which I don't know if that's for cleaning up this space or if it's for brushing out the inside of the boiler. So, were you ever the FNG on the ship and had to work in the trash compactor room? How did it work on your ship? Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State. We also receive a lot of support from businesses and private individuals like yourselves, and in particular the private individuals who have donated to us in the last year have made a huge difference in our ability to create YouTube content. We've been able to go from making one video a week to making as many as 5 videos a week. We really appreciate your support to both the museum and our YouTube channel. There's a link in the description if you'd like to continue supporting us. Also remember to like, share, and subscribe so that you're notified when more content comes out. Thanks for watching.